Good morning, children. Today I am going to start with a new topic, classical genetics. Children, you know very well what is meant by genetics. Genetics is nothing but a study of inheritance of characters from one generation to another generation. This is called what? Genetics and hereditary. Okay. Genetics, in this topic we are going to see about the genes, structure, and what is the thing which control the characters, and how the genes are discovered, who did the marvelous work against that, all we are going to see. Genetics is the study how living things receive common traits from previous generation. No field of science has changed the world more in the past 50 years than genetics. The scientific and technological advances in genetics have transformed agriculture, medicine, and forensic science, etc. So, if we speak simple, how the living things receive a common characters from their previous generation. That means how the young ones are receiving characters from their parents. Okay. See, you know very well in sexually reproducing organism, gametes fuse together form a zygote. Zygote develop into embryo. Embryo develop into an young one. This is the common sequence of developmental stages of sexually reproducing organisms, right? Okay. Here is my question: how how when the gametes fused, it forms zygote. How the zygote can develop into an young one? Actually, zygote is a single organism, single celled cell, and how it can be transferred into a complete organism. This is what question. Okay, zygote is the product of fertilization. What is mean by fertilization? Fertilization is nothing but fusion of male and female gamete, right? Okay, by fusion of male and female gamete we are getting zygote. Okay, this zygote develop into a multicellular embryo, and this embryo develop into a complete young one, right? Okay, then what is the message is there in the zygote? How the single celled zygote can be developed into a young one? This is what a question. Okay, the single celled zygote consists of a diploid number of chromosome of a specific organism. This diploid number of chromosome consists of a sequence of genes which for this sequence of gene can develop into a characters which are necessary for that particular organisms. Okay, so the genes are the things which can develop into a particular character in a sexually reproducing organism. Okay, so these things all was not aware during the period of 18th century. The great scientist Krieger Georg Mendel, after his discovery, became to know that genes are responsible for the conduction of character from a previous generation to the next generation. Okay, then how he discovered this gene, how the genes are inherited from parents to offspring, or we are going to see in this lesson. Genetic is the study of how living things receive common traits from previous generation. No field of science has changed the world more in the past 550 years than genetics. So that we know very well. Genetics is a blooming field of science nowadays. The scientific and technological advances in genetics have transformed agriculture, medicine, and forensic science, etc. Genetics, what is genetics? The science of heredity, that is inheritance. Genetics is the branch of biological science which deals with the mechanism of transmission of character from parents to offspring. The term genetic was introduced by W. Batson in 1906. Okay, bracketed. definition for genetics and also who coined the term genetics. This is, you will get as 2 mark question. Genetic is branch of biological science which deals with the mechanism of transmission of characters from parents to offspring. The term genetic was introduced by W. Batson in 1906. The 4 major disciplines of genetics are transmission genetics, that is classical genetics, which deals with the transmission of genes from parents to offspring. The foundation of classical genetics came from the study of hereditary behavior of 7 genes by Richard Jogel Mendel. Transmission genetics, there are 4 subdivisions are there in the genetics. First one is transmission genetics. What does it deals with? It deals with the transmission of genes from parents to offspring. Okay, how we can found that genes are transmitted from parents to offspring? It was for this question we can get the answer. This is due to the foundation of classical genetics came from the study of hereditary behavior of 7 genes by Richard Mendel. Next one is molecular genetics. It deals with the structure and function of gene molecular level. Okay, I am speaking gene. Where it is located? It is located inside the chromosome. Where the chromosomes are located? It is located inside the nucleus. Where the nucleus are present? It is present in the center of the cell. Okay, this is what common features. You know very well, we cannot see a single cell of any organism with our naked eyes. Okay, we can see with the help of microscope. Okay, we can see the cell inside the under the microscope, but we cannot see a single cell with our naked eyes. Imagine how tiny it will be. Okay, so inside this tiny structure, nucleus is present. Inside the nucleus 46 chromosome. As an example of human, 40, each cell consists of 46 chromosome. So inside that nucleus 46 chromosomes are present. Inside the chromosome, the genes are arranged in a sequential order, and imagine how tiny it will be. Then the study of that level, that is called what? Molecular level. What does the genes are made up of? We are studying up to that level. It is called what? Molecular genetics. Next, population genetics deals with heredity in groups of individual for traits which is determined by a few genes. That's it. And quantitative genetics deals with the heredity of traits in groups of individuals where the traits are governed by many genes simultaneously. What is the reason for similarities, differences of appearance and skipping of generation? Genes, functional unit of inheritance, the basic unit of heredity which transmit biochemical, anatomical and behavioral traits from parents to offspring. Heredity and variation. Genetic is often described as a science which deals with heredity and variation. Heredity, what is mean by heredity? Heredity is the transmission of character from parents to offspring is called what? Heredity. And what is mean by offspring? What is mean by variation? The organism belonging to the same natural population or species that shows a differences in the characteristic is called variations. Variation is of 2 types, discontinuous variation and continuous variation. So variation, when we observe in individual organism of same species, we could find some differences among them. They are not exactly alike in all the features, okay, of either externally and internally, and this is called what? Variation. When we look at what it is, siblings of a parent, they could show some differences among themselves. Okay, though they came from the same parents, they both are not alike in their external appearances or internal structure also, and this is called what? Variation. So the variation are of 2 types. One is continuous variation, another one is discontinuous variation. So variation, discontinuous variation, within a population there are some characteristics which show a limited form of variation. Example, style, length and primula, plan height of Gordon P. In discontinuous variation, The characteristic are controlled by one or two major genes which may have two or more allelic forms. These variations are genetically determined by inheritance factors. Individual produced by these variations show differences without any intermediate form between them, and there is no overlapping between the two phenotypes. The phenotypic expression is unaffected by environmental conditions. This is also called qualitative inheritance. Okay, right. What is discontinuous variation? Within a population, there are some characteristics which serves a limited form of variation. Style length in primula. It serves some limited form of variation only. It will not show more number of variation in it. And plant height of Gordon P also. In discontinuous variation, the characteristic are controlled by one or two major genes only, which may have two or more allelic form. These variations are genetically determined by inheritance factors. Individual produced by these variations show differences without any intermediate form between them, and there is no overlapping. That means what? Tall, either tall or dwarf. There is no intermediate between. If we take height of pea plant, there is two extremities in its variation, either tall or dwarf. There is no intermediate in between them. Same way, if we take the color of the flower, either yellow flower or violet flower. So there is no intermediate color between them. So that is called what? Discontinuous variation. There is no overlapping between them. The phenotypic expression is unaffected by environmental condition. This is also called as qualitative. Since the variation is not affected by environmental condition, it is also called as what? Qualitative inheritance. Next one is continuous variation. This variation may be due to the combining effect of environmental and genetic factors. Okay. Continuous variation, see, discontinuous variation is purely by means of genetics. But in continuous variation, both environmental and genetic factors. In a population, most of the characteristics exhibit a complete gradation from one extreme to the other without any break. Inheritance of phenotype is determined by the combined effect of many genes and environmental factor. This is also known as quantitative inheritance. Example, human height and skin color. So, inheritance of a phenotype is determined by combined effect of many genes, but in discontinuous variation, the effect is controlled by one or two genes with two allelic forms. But in continuous variation, there are many genes involved in controlling of this character, because many intermediate phenotype also there, overlapping of genes are there. For example, skin color of human. So when we observe the skin color of humans, we cannot see the same colors of skin in all the humans. Each one, they have different colors of genes, different colors of skin. This is what continuous variation. And importance of variation. Variation makes some individuals better fitted in the struggle for existence. Variation makes some individual better fitted in the struggle for existence. You know very well, since I didn't start about evolution, you could not understand about the struggle for existence. Usually there was a concept called natural selection given by evolutionist Darwin. According to him, the overpopulation is taken place. Due to overpopulation, there is a scarcity or struggle for the natural resources such as food, water and shelter, and the organisms which have more adaptation to that changing environment adapted to that. The organism which do not have any adaptation to that changing environment cannot be survived. This is called what? Survival of fittest. See, many changes has taken place in the environment. Okay, so according to that environment, many of the organism can get its adaptation and accommodate with that changing environment and lead a life. But the organism which do not get any adaptive structure and cannot survive the changing environment and this is called what? Struggle for existence. This changing adaptation is due to the variation. About this struggle for existence, we will discuss in the evolution lesson in detail, children. They help the individual to adapt themselves to the changing environment. Yes, what I said. So, when variation has taken place, this variation can help the organism to accommodate with the changing environment. It provides the genetic material for natural selection. Variation allow breeders to improve better yield, quicker growth, increased resistance and lesser input. They constitute the raw material for evolution. This is a 3 mark or 5 mark question, children, please bracket it. Next is Mendelism. The contribution of Mendel to genetics is called Mendelism. It includes all concepts brought out by Mendel through his original research on plant hybridization. Mendelian genetic concepts are basic to modern genetics. Therefore, Mendel is called as father of genetics. So before, as I said, before 18th century, nobody knows that genes are responsible for the conduction of character from parents to offspring. Different scientists said different concept regarding that. After Mendel's discovery only, the genes are responsible for the characters, that characters are inherited from parents to offspring. Okay, hence he is called as what? Father of genetics. The contribution of Mendel to genetics is called Mendelism. It includes all concepts brought about by Mendel through his original research on plant hybridization. Hybridization, you know very well, crossing of two different species is called hybridization. Mendelian genetic concepts are basic to modern genetics. Therefore, Mendel is called father of genetics. Father of genetics, Gregor Johann Mendel. The first geneticist, Gregor Johann Mendel, unraveled the mystery of heredity. He was born on 22nd July 1822 in Heissendorf, Silesia, now Hence, Czechoslovakia, Austria. After school education, later he studied botany, physics and mathematics at the University of Vienna. He then entered a monastery of St. Thomas at Brunn in Austria and continued his interest in plant hybridization. In 1849, Mendel got a temporary position in a school as a teacher, and he performed a series of elegant experiments with the pea plant in his garden. So, his education qualification, this and that all, please learn by yourself, children. And his 1849, he got a temporary position in a school as a teacher. And at the same time, he started his series of elegant experiment with the pea plant in his garden. 1856, he started his historic studies on pea plants. 1856 to 1863 was the period of Mendel's hybridization experiment on pea plants. Mendel discovered the principles of heredity by studying the inheritance of 7 pairs of contrasting traits of pea plant in his garden. So, the period of Mendel's hybridization was 1856 to 1863. During this period, he discovered the principles of heredity by studying the inheritance of 7 pairs of contrasting characters or traits of pea plant in his garden. So, during that period, he discovered that which is the principle of heredity. Okay, gene is the principle of heredity. He discovered that. How he discovered that? By studying the contrasting characters, 7 contrasting characters which was seen in the pea plant. Mendel crossed and catalogued 24,034 plants through many generations. His paper entitled as Experiments on Plant Hybrids was presented and published in the Proceedings of the Brunn Society of Natural History in 1866. Mendel was the first systematic researcher in the field of genetics. Mendel was successful because, Mendel was successful in his work on genetics. Why? Mendel was successful because He applied mathematics and statistical methods to biology and laws of probability to his breeding experiment. Okay, so Mendel applied mathematics as well as statistical method to biology and laws of probability to his breeding experiment. He followed scientific methods and kept accurate and detailed records that include quantitative data of the outcome of his cross, and at the same time he followed scientific methods and kept accurate and detailed records that include quantitative data of the outcome of his cross. His experiments were carefully planned and he used large samples also. The pairs of contrasting character which were controlled by factor were present on separate chromosome. So, the 7 contrasting character which he used for his experiment are present in the separate chromosomes or were present in the separate chromosome, and the parents selected by Mendel were pure breeding lines, and the purity was tested by self crossing the progeny for many generations. So, the parents selected by Mendel were pure breeding, and the purity was tested by self crossing the progeny for many generations. And next one is Mendel's experiment system in the garden pea plant. This we will see in my next class, children. Bye. And homework given for you is, Mendel was successful in his work. Why? One question, and define heredity and variation and definition for genetics. These are the questions. Please do it immediately. And girls are always improper. Hari is sending his paper then and there. Soundarya, Jocelyn, Kirti is a very irregular children. You people are not at all submitting your papers by time. Please submit it immediately and do the homework. Bye ma.